Anku Jasaneb, Duawu Nature Naturu, Duawu Emyaku, Ank Emmaat Wabet. Give thanks for all those who are here right now and who will be joining me in the future. Um, I was just going over this book. This is by E.S.P. McPherson. One of the best books you can get on the culture and the growth and spread of Rastafari. It's a very good book. It goes into Brother Hibert's Masonic orientations. It goes into the lives of the founders and their Masonic orientations. This is Howell. So as Rastafari grows into what we want it to become, it is necessary that we go back to the roots of our African history and go beyond the Bible, beyond the what less than 3,000 years of King Solomon, so-called King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, going beyond the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, and going back to our indigenous African culture and our inheritance. I will be continuing our reading, of course. This is chapter 3 of the dissertation, Anunian Cosmology, the process of remembering within the universe. In the last chapter, we explore the breadth of academic writing about the authenticity of Rastafari thought concerning the deification of Haile Selassie I. In reviewing the three major perspectives, we conclude that the major hindrance for intellectual writing in this area of interest is one of approach. Using either sociological, apologistic, or Christological approaches, each writer undoubtedly insists that Rastafari's conceptualization of Haile Selassie as divine in any capacity should be rethought, if not discarded. Our work in this chapter, then, outlines the basic themes within the Anunian or Kemetic cosmology through which we can begin to authenticate Rastafari's conceptualization of Haile Selassie I. Outlining the Anunian conceptual relationship between the origin and structure of the universe is important at this juncture because it provides the templative foundation through which we can begin our conversation about the process of remembering or putting the pieces back together. Though our discussion about Osar or Wasar is the interest of the next chapter, our discussion within this chapter proceeds in a two-step process, the first of which clears intellectual space around academic ideas concerning the extent to which the universe informs and explains human thought and behavior. Fleshing out the intricacies of the Anunian cosmology comprises the second portion of this chapter. The major questions that this chapter attempts to answer include: what is the structure and origin of the universe in the most ancient written Anunian cosmological discourse? And what role does the cycles of time contribute to how we can map out human experiences? Cosmology within academic discourse, the universe informing human thought and behaviors. We begin our discussion about cosmology, then, and its relationship to our thoughts and behaviors by clearing intellectual space around my use of the term cosmology instead of, say, adapting a more befitting rendering of any African term denoting an interrelated comprehension of the structure and origin of the universe. Borrowing from the ancient terminology cosmos, 20th century writers, particularly those writing within the field of African psychology, theorize about the relationship between cosmos, now cosmos, and culture. Challenging the Greek idea about the separation between the order of the universe and human thoughts and behaviors, Wade Nobles redefines culture. No longer thought to be just the domain of the philosophers, African psychologists suggest that there is a different relationship, sorry, that there is a direct relationship between cosmos and human existence. Each human being not only comprises the cosmos, but the cosmos integrally informs all human thought and behavior. Relying on the etymology of logos, that is, knowledge, Nobles and other African psychologists use the term cosmology to reference the perception of knowledge about the structure and origin of the universe. In this way, each culture relies upon cosmology to create their perspective on reality or worldview. It is a culture's perception of the structure and origin of the universe that is undoubtedly inseparable from how humans comprising the culture not only relate to the universe, but think and behave in the world, whether each member is aware of this process or not. What is more is that African psychological theorists rely on ancient African cosmology to explain ancient and contemporary homeland and diasporan thoughts and behaviors. Informed by their readings of ancient Kemetic, Dogon, Yoruba, and other African cosmological narratives or cosmogonies, African psychologists propose that ancient Africans conclude that the origin and structure of the universe emerges from one source, and that this source unifies all phenomena in existence. In other words, cosmology of ancients conveys that the universe exists according to the principles one's oneness of being. Ancient African cosmologies collectively reveal that the world and the phenomena comprising the world is an interconnected and interdependent edifice, and that all things in the universe are interconnected and independent. The universe and all things within it originated by the divine, or nature, the supreme being. That is to say, according to the African psychologists who theorize out of ancient conceptions, human beings consciously and unconsciously think and behave according to the principles of the oneness of being and the interconnectivity and interdependence. Kobe Kambon discusses these cosmological principles as they relate to the most primordial African human condition. He writes that ancient and contemporary African peoples, homeland and diasporic Africans, often emphasize groupness, survival of the group, sameness and commonality, corporateness, cooperation, collective responsibility, and interdependence. Taken together, he continues this body of principles comprising African cosmology, defines the African survival thrust. Often conscious, yet frequently an unconscious experience, the African survival thrust is the comprehensive way in which Africans think and behave as social, affiliative, and social participatory beings. Therefore, African cosmology is inseparable from African thinking and behaving, and the African psychological view of cosmology is a direct challenge to the Greek cosmon, opening the intellectual path to viewing a direct relationship between cosmology and human existence. In our work, we define cosmology in a way that takes into consideration the principles of the oneness of being, as it relates to thoughts and behaviors other than those of highly visible social affiliative and social participatory types. In other words, we extend how we define cosmology so that we begin to understand its relationship to the ways in which even our most intimate thoughts and behaviors never deviate from the forces comprising and patterned objectively by the entire universe, whether we are aware of it or not. Turning to contemporary Kemetic cosmologist and practitioner Ra Unefer Amen, we find a usage of cosmology for how we will think about cosmology for the remainder of the chapter, and resultantly, the dissertation succinctly, succinctly, succinctly operationalizing cosmology. Amen writes that first, cosmology provides an ordered and unified, synthetical view of who and what is God, human beings, and the forces that administrate and sustain the world. No understanding of a subject can take place without an ordered and unified presentation of its whole and parts. Second, cosmology, like all blueprints and maps, provides a framework that guides thinking and action through the vast array of seemingly unrelated life situations to the successful identification and attainment of the goal of living. It achieves this by showing how all events in a person's life are integrally related to his or her destiny. Through it is revealed the spiritual value of each and every event in a person's life. Amen's definition of cosmology extends our understanding of it by detailing the function of the creator, human existence, and forces or energies that comprise the universe. For Amen, these ideas are important because it seems for him, according to ancient Kemetic cosmology, that the structure of the universe and the forces comprising the universe influence every thought, decision, and experience comprising what we may think is normative, mundane, daily functioning. Defining cosmology, then, in this way provides us with a systematic first step in our argument of this dissertation. Every thought and experience is a microcosmic of the function of God and the forces that administrate and sustain the world. In keeping with Amen's expression about the function of cosmology, this work then privileges the oldest Kemetic cosmology. We therefore rely on the Anunian or Heliopolis cosmology within oral tradition around 40,000 before the Common Era, 40,000 years before the Common Era, among the Kemetic Nile Valley inhabitants, and written down around 3,500 before the Common Era. Viewing the Anunian cosmology as the oldest documentation of the structure and origin of the universe is plausible considering the scribing of the cosmology in Medu divine speech, on the walls of the Merikuti, the pyramids, just prior to 5,000 before the Common Era. Inscriptions on the walls of the Merakut of Unas, Teti, Pepi I, Merneri, and Pepi II, for example, are some of the earliest written explanations of the origin and structure of the universe in relationship to human thinking and behavior in the world. Anunian cosmology is therefore foundational because contemporary Kemetic writers conclude that the Anunian cosmological conception informs the later pyramid writings among the Khnum or Hermopolis, 2050 BCE, during the Middle Kingdom, and the cosmology of Waset or Thebes, 1580 BCE, during the New Kingdom. These later cosmologies, emerging out of the Anunian conceptions that predate them, also inform the Per Emheru, or the Book of Going Forth by Day, around 1570, and the later Menefer or Memphis, 712 to 698 BCE cosmology. Prioritizing any version of the Kemetic cosmology in efforts to elaborate an African-centered framework adheres to Diop's often quoted call that at this point we must underscore the abyss that separates it from those Africans who believe that it can be enough, to flirt with Egyptian culture. For as the return to Egypt in all domains is the necessary condition for reconciling African civilizations with history, in order to renovate African culture, far from being a reveling in the past, a look toward the Egypt of antiquity is the best way to conceive and build our cultural future. In reconceived and renewed African culture, Egypt will play the same role that Greco Latin antiquity plays in Western culture. Let's read that piece from Diop again. At this point, we must underscore the abyss that separates it from those Africans who believe that it can be enough to flirt with Egyptian culture. For us, the return to Egypt in all domains is the necessary conditions for reconciling African civilization with history, in order to renovate African culture. Far from being a reveling in the past, a look toward the Egypt of antiquity is the best way to conceive and build our cultural future. In reconceived and renewed African culture, Egypt will play the same role that Greco Latin antiquity plays in Western culture. That's by Diop. African centered intellectuals have rightly relied upon this proverbial wisdom to suggest that Kemet provides cultural anteriority for homeland and diasporan African cultural phenomena. It is with this objective in mind that we explore the Anunian cosmology as the first expression of remembering in our work, as Diop's call is indeed for Africans to rely on Kemet as a foundation from which to remind us about African ways of thinking and being in the world. We should be clear that during the expanse of Kemetic cultural existence, major themes directing thought and behavior remain consistent. There are, of course, changes in cosmological terminology. Changes occur as a result of social, political, and personal circumstances. That is to say, that varying environmental forces and cycles of political and economic instability and stability necessitates varying explanations and solutions that the Seba and Sesh, the teacher and the scribes, as subsequent cosmologies and admonitions in what becomes Egyptian literature. Though these writings address varying important changes within Kemetic political infrastructure, the Seba and Sesh never alter the basic foundational assumptions about the origin and structure of the universe and the relationship between African cosmology and thinking and behaving within the Kemetic world. We can view the later cosmologies, those in which the Seba and Sesh scribes after the Old Kingdom, as expressions of more in-depth understandings about the structure and origin of the universe, or as more tedious explanations about the origin and structure of the universe. Interestingly, African-centered intellectuals often theorized out of the oft-revered Menefer, or Memphis, that Nasut Shabaka preserves around 712 to 698 BCE. Theorists' choice to rely on the later Menefer interpretation of cosmology may exist for several reasons. One reason may be that African-centered writers can cross-reference the Menefer cosmology with what Egyptologists refer to as Kemetic literature. Seba and Sesh scribe prior to the rescribing of the Menefer cosmology. African-centered intellectuals can therefore contextualize the thematic principles within the Men-Nefer cosmology or Memphis cosmology, with themes concerning the social and political context written within, say, Tale of Two Brothers and the teachings of Ptah-hotep. Yet another reason may be that Shabaka scribes the Men-Nefer during the 25th dynasty as the reintroduction of an ancestral cosmology of the Anu. Using Men-Nefer cosmology is therefore important in many ways for African-centered scholars who attempt to deal with the restoration of African ways of knowing. The Men-Nefer cosmology represents a comprehensive blueprint of cosmological principles that obliterates distinctions between that which is seemingly past, present, and future. Our work relies on the examples set forth by African-centered writers' usage of Men-Nefer or Memphis origin and purpose of the universe as a way of understanding human thought and behavior. This chapter primarily relies on the basic assumption within the Anunian cosmology. We, however, also rely on the breadth of Kemetic cosmological writings through which to further clarify ideas within the Anunian cosmology. We therefore include African-centered Kemetic and Egyptological interpretations of the Old, Middle, New, Third and Intermediate periods, including excerpts from the Pyramid text, Coffin text, the Pu'em and the Amduat, where necessary. These texts provide primary, secondary, and tertiary sources that help to clarify concepts that are not necessarily clear for us within the Anunian cosmology. Not at all an oxymoronic gesture, because as African-centered theorists and Egyptologists suggest, each subsequent cosmology is a reinterpretation of the assumptions within the Anunian cosmology. It is to these major Anunian cosmological themes, beginning with outlining the characteristics of Nu, the foundational essence of existence, which we now turn. Okay? This is quite a long chapter. I think it has like maybe 30 something pages. Don't know if I'll be able to read all one time. Nu, the source. Writings about the Anunian origin and structure of the universe suggest that the Anu conceptualize that the patterns found within the earthly environmental surroundings reflect the overall patterns of the cosmos or the universe. One of the most important natural resources that came to exemplify the pattern of the universe is the Nile. As waterway for communication and exchanges between Nile Valley inhabitants, the Nile is the major artery on which the Anu depends for community cohesion. At the point of yearly inundation, the overflow of the Nile River provides arable land for the Anu to cultivate agricultural foodstuffs with which the Anu subsists. With the recession of the Nile, activities within and around the Nile resume. The entire process occurs as a regenerative cycle of nature and human interdependence. It is therefore this cyclical movement of the Nile that sustains the Anu existence, that becomes the material symbol for not only the source and sustenance of their immediate material existence. The pattern of the Nile became the pattern in which the expanse of the universe came into being. The term for this source of existence, in which the Nile is a material symbol, is Nu. Several writers define the term. Our use of three seemingly varying definitions demonstrates the comprehensiveness of the Anunian concept. For Amen, Nu is oneness. That's Raune for Amen. For Amen, Nu is oneness. He writes that Nu is undifferentiated. awareness and experience where there was no perception, just subsisting infinite awareness and experience prior to time, space, and forces. However, for Egyptologist James Allen, Nu is dialectic. About Nu, he writes that the primeval waters, which reflects the Egyptians' concept of the universe as the limitless ocean of dark and motionless water, within which the world of life floats as a sphere or air and light, as a sphere of air and light. Muata Ashby defines it as well. For him, Nu is an essentially pure, formless ocean or sea of awareness and experience from which the universe emerges, persists, and returns. Regardless of interpretation, the major theme within each interpretation is that Nu is the source of existence, and it is the source in which all in existence eventually returns, just as the Anu describes the Nile. To be sure, Nu, with all of its descriptive attributes, is synonymous with large expanse of waters, including the Nile. Nu is simultaneously motionless and life-giving. One of Nu creations begins by inundating itself as the unseen forces comprising existence and manifesting as both the unseen and material realms. Budge, that's the Egyptologist, Wallace Budge, writes that Nu represents the primeval watery mass from which all the gods were evolved. Simply put, out of Nu the Creator creates creation. In the same manner that waves arise out of the ocean and appear to be of different shapes, sizes, and textures. Ashby further conveys that the objects of the phenomenal universe, the stars, the sun, planets, trees, animals, and all living beings, arise out of the primeval ocean. That which is in the world, then, is nothing more than the manifestations of Nu, the ocean of consciousness. Our major point here is that Nu is the source of all that exists, and as Amen correctly asserts, all that we have been, now, are, and can ever be are modifications of the subjective being or source. What we can suggest then is that the Nile is template for the oneness characterizing the source of existence. There are 3 points which convey that the Nile is a template for the sources of existence. A source which we can refer to as oneness of all in existence. Our first point hints towards the idea that the Nile symbolizes oneness because in its inundated state, the Nile is one, still and motionless, as it is not overflowing. Second, the Nile flows and informs the existence of other bodies of water. Third, though inundation occurs, the process ensures human sustenance. This too is an act of oneness because it is through the motion of the Nile that vegetation occurs and human life survives because of this process. We can conclude then that as the Nile becomes symbolism for the working of Nu, the states of the Nile come to represent the one source of creation and its workings. Nu is oneness regardless of the state in which it exists. Out of this oneness of existence, we can suggest that we have our first definition of dismembering. The Anu suggests that with the onset of creation out of Nu, the process of creation, motion occurs. The creation of the Nile, the earth's major waters, and both the unseen and material realms only exists because of this initial act out of Nu. Likewise, in the same way, Nu is in motion to create the universe. The motion, inundation of the Nile, and the bodies of water allows life to exist for those residing in that particular geography. Nu's first act of motion, as the process of creating creation, is therefore synonymous with the secondary and tertiary material processes of motion, all which we can define as dismembering. That is to say, that when nu becomes motion from its motionless state, it is this motion that creates creation, including motion itself. This moment is our initial instance of dismembering. Subsequent motion, including the motion of the Nile, which symbolizes Nu for the Anu, is therefore too in the process of dismembering to create and sustain human existence. We can furthermore argue that the states of the Nile also hint towards the source of existence, providing the first act of remembering. On the one hand, we may wish to argue that the initial still oneness source of existence, Nu, and the motionless Nile are in fact within its initial state remembered. But to claim that these initial states of Nu and the Nile are in fact remembered states is problematic because to remember suggests that motion has already taken place and that which emerges has returned to its initial state of rest. We may find it possible that the Nile is remembered in its initial state. This point is only valid if we suggest that the Nile is remembered in its initial state prior to the first inundation, because prior to the first inundation, the Nile constantly flows, moves into other bodies of water. Here, then, we can suggest that the Nile, even prior to inundation, is in fact remembered as motion already exists. This idea about the Nile, however, does not correlate with the initial process of Nu, because for the Anu, Nu was motionless prior to creation. We can conclude then that when the Nile recedes after the inundation, the Nile then remembers itself by returning to a state of motionless, oneness, and unity, though the Nile is always in a constant state of motion as it flows and informs other bodies of water. Nu, therefore, is constantly in a state of motion, that is, Nu is constantly creating creation. Yet, that which emerges out of Nu must return to Nu, the source of creation, in the same way the Nile recedes and still flows. And for the Anu, the Nile symbolizes this possibility of a remembering state, a continuous state in which Nu adheres. While our discussion thus far has dealt with the origins and major blueprint of the cyclical template within Kemetic thought, the intricate analysis concerning the microcosmic cyclical process that brings about Nu's movement from dismembering to remembering is in order. Our concern with the microcosmic creating and activating forces within the Anunian cosmology is important for our work because although Nile and Nu are the organic roots, there are specific forces contributing to how the comprehensive patterns of Nu influence the process of Osar and the process of remembering Osar. For without both the creative and activating forces, Nu would not be in motion and remembering could not occur. Okay. Creation. That's the microcosmic creation. Creation within the Anunian conception occurs in three cycled process. The first is the creator creating itself out of the source of existence, Nu. The activating force that the creator uses to animate the unseen spirit of forces comprises existence and material realms, comprises the second cycle. The extension of the creator as the unseen forces comprising existence into the material realm is the third cycle. Our interpretation of the cosmology is informed by one of the most prolific writers on the subject, Muata Ashby. Those who don't know Muata Ashby, you can try to get his books. He is a prolific writer, like Raunefa, and he also does a lot of yoga, unlike Raunefa. Intellectual practitioner, his work models the need for keen insight on the cosmological structure as he diagrams the development of the universe, including Osar and the experiential phenomenal material realm. Borrowing from his writings, in addition to Egyptologists, we shall now discuss each cycle in detail. The Anu conceptualized that the Creator is as an ever-present and evolving attribute prior to the comprising existence. Non-Kabbalistic Jewish traditions consider Jehovah and Yahweh to be the Creator. Within the Christian tradition, God is the cause of the universe. Within both of these traditions, the Creator is the personification of masculine gender and male biological sex. Furthermore, the Creator is deistic and exists outside human experience as he has moved himself away from creation, only to return in flesh for a final soteriological dispensation. The Creator, however, within the Anu cosmology is non-gendered and non-deistic. That is, that which the Anu refers to as nature, at once transcends gender distinctions and embodies all in existence. Because the source of existence is no thing, nature, which allows existence to come into being out of Nu, emanates the same qualities of Nu. Articulating a direct continuum between nature and all in existence, nature exists in tandem with Nu, through which nature projects itself as the unseen realm. Turning to the Anu cosmology, we read within the first few lines that nothing existed in heaven or in earth, no plants, no creeping things, and no places, before I, nature, created them out of the Nu, the primeval water. As no thing or no places exist prior to nature articulation of place out of Nu, nature brings forth time and space, where awareness and experience are active and in motion. In this way, then, nature is that which begins dismemberment from Nu, yet simultaneously binds that which is created to the qualities of Nu. In other words, creation is still inherently interdependent and interrelated within and across its created state, though seemingly dependent. Nature relies on an activating force through which it brings forth the unseen and material realms out of Nu. In the same way that the Anu rely upon the movements of the Nile to conceptualize Nu, the Anu rely on the sun's luminous properties on its journey through the sky to conceptualize the qualities of the life force activating existence, Ra Atum. Hekau 217 from the Pyramid text, written around 5000 before the Common Era, or prior, provides evidence of the relationship between the cycles of the sun and Ra-Atum. It reads, O Ra-Atum, may you traverse the sky. Being united in the darkness, may you rise in the horizon, in the place where it is well with you. While the writing derives from later sources and is not found within the Anu cosmology, we can use the above excerpt to make our point, especially in reference to a later Kemetic writing. The myth of Ra and Oset reads that I am Kepri in the morning and Ra at noonday, and Temu in the evening. We can suggest then that as the sun rises in the east, the sun begins its traverse across the sky and provides the light of dawn, the beginning of the new day. This is Kepri or Kepra. Kepra. With the sun momentarily stabilizing in the north, it becomes Ra when the sun emits its most intense rays just before it sets in the west. As Tem in the west, the positioning of the sun indicates that the darkness of the night is approaching. Hidden in the south below the sun is not seen in the material realm. Yet, it eventually rises again in the east to continuously journey through the cycle. So too does Ra Atum activate the universe by traversing the sky after rising in the horizon, from being united in the darkness. Nature, therefore, for the Anu, activates creation through Ra Atum's activating cycle. We need to reiterate one important point here. Ra Atum sets the micro-template in which the unseen and material realms adhere. Though nature creates the unseen forces within existence prior to the material realm, what we mean here, and what we still explain below, is that the unseen forces, while adhering to the particular cyclical functioning patterns of Ra Atum, are both the template for the material, experiential realms. We now explore Ra Atum in more detail. The rising of Ra Atum in the horizon is Kepra, the first action of creation. Within this rising stage of creation, Ra Atum functions in two capacities, both of which have come to characterize the qualities of Ra Atum as cyclical template for which all that comes into existence adheres. About this twofold process, Amen writes that the first movement, the primeval impulse induced by the action of will, was spiral in form. Thus, the first act of creation was metaphorized as the rolling of mud by a beetle, the so-called god Kepra. On the one hand, the beetle, what the Anu refers to as Kepra, rolls the egg in mud in a spiral movement, or in other words, a curvilinear, I should say. In other words, a curvilinear movement. Seeing the spiral process in which the result is the creation of a new beetle is important for the Anu, for it signals that creation of a new beetle requires that its egg is source, point, or center that remains constant, while simultaneously extending itself from and around the center. Turning to American Heritage Dictionary, we read that a spiral is a curve on a plane that winds around a fixed center point at a continuously increasing or decreasing distance from the point. So too is the process in which nature relies on Ra Atum to create itself, the first act of creation for the Anu. Ra Atum's manifestation out of Nu is a process in which Ra Atum creates itself from a source point or center, Nu, which remains as source point or center as Ra Atum simultaneously revolves to create itself. Ra Atum as Kepra signals the qualities of the first act of creation, itself as Kepra coming into being or rising into being through an initial vertical spiral formation. On the other hand, this spiral formation that occurs within the Kepra stage is template for the macrocosmic process through which nature creates and sustains the unseen and material realms. The sun's movement across the sky brings forth each new day. The sun's movement across the sky brings forth each new day. Creating a new beetle requires that the beetle egg rolls in a vertical spiral across an expanse of mud. What we can infer about the process of creation according to the Anu is that all nature creates after Ra Atum creates itself as Kepra and comes into existence according to the vertical spiral formation, in the same pattern in which the sun traverses the sky and the beetle egg rolls in the mud, quoting the Anunian Cosmology about the movement as Kepra, it reads, "These are the words that nature spoke after he, or he and she, had come into existence. I came into being in the form of Kepra, and I was the creator of what came into being. I formed myself out of the primeval matter, and I formed myself in the primeval matter." All that nature creates and sustains is the unseen and the later material realm, inherently adheres to Kepra's initial vertical spiral process of coming into being. Therefore, while Kepra signals the rising out of Nu and becoming into creation, all in existence spirals through the unseen and material realm, while simultaneously remaining connected to the source, point, center, Nu. Within the process of becoming, nature relies on a force in which all in existence adheres. Though the Anu conceptualized that the process of creating and sustaining the unseen and material realms is an expression of Kepra. Kepra is the life force in existence. Both the unseen and material realms adhere to the forces allowing this expressive connection to exist. To do so, nature extends itself as the structure in which all creation adheres. The Anu reveal that the structured force in which all in existence adheres is Ma'at. Their cosmology reads that I, nature, could not find a standing place. Therefore, I worked a charm from my heart. I found my standing place in Ma'at and created all my attributes. I was alone, and I had not yet spit out Shu, which is air, or Tefnut, which is moisture. This is to show you how ancient law, order, reciprocity, balance, Ma'at, how long Ma'at, how old Ma'at is. And it was there before all the creations. Unlike the Judeo-Christian narrative that everything was created and then 10 commandments were given. Okay, let's go. For the Anu, nature only becomes its attributes, the unseen and material realms, through the process of bringing forth a unifying and reciprocating force that nature attributes, the unseen and material realms adhere. Ma'at symbolizes that which the nature's heart symbolizes, that which ensures interdependence and interrelationship of the totality of the seen and material realms in Ma'at. While the cosmology refers to the function of Ma'at, purposive explanation of its interdependent and interrelated properties and potentials are found within varying Kemetic literatures. Within the Anu express the workings of Ma'at as the 42 laws or confessions or admonitions, which each Kemetian familiar with these precepts attempts to exist in the world. We mentioned above that the Anu conceptualized that the sun traverses the sky and stabilizes momentarily in the north of the sky after passing through Kepra. The Anu cosmology only refers to Kepra as creation coming into being, but does not directly state any other moment of Ra'atun. As the sun, according to the pyramid text, is the symbolism for the cyclical creation of existence, we turn to Stephen Quirk's translation of Jan Assmann's Sonikumem in Thibasichen Graben for Hekau about the Ra'atum stage in nature's process of creation. We read within one excerpt about Ra. You cross the sky in life and power. You make the sky festive in the morning barge. You pass the day in your sacred boat, your heart sweet. Ma'at, what is right, is appeared at your brow. Rise, Ra. What we can infer from this passage is one of the most important moments in Ra'atum's function. At the moment when Ra crosses the sky in life and power, Ra'atum is at its highest peak, sustaining creation. If Kepra is the stage in which nature brings forth the immutable structure concerning the curvilinearity of existence, Kepra and interdependence, interrelational, and reciprocity within existence, Ma'at then, the Ra stage, is the stage where both structures, Kepra and Ma'at, are upheld. Let's read that again. At the moment when Ra crosses the sky in life and power, Ra'atum is at its highest peak, sustaining creation. If Kepra is the stage in which nature brings forth the immutable structure concerning the curvilinearity of existence, Kepra and interdependence, interrelational and reciprocity within existence, Ma'at then, the Ra stage, is the stage where both structures, Kepra and Ma'at, are upheld. Simply put, during the Kepra stage, nature's creation of Ma'at out of its heart is nature seemingly separating from itself. Existence thereby occurs as a result of this initial act of seeming independence. What succeeds from this initial separation in nature's creation of the seen and unseen realms? Yet, Ma'at simultaneously allows for all that nature creates to exist in accordance with interdependence, interrelationship, and reciprocity. During this Ra stage, Ra'atum, like the noonday sun, is the force in which the unseen and material realms transcend seeming separation and duality and function in accordance with interdependence, interrelational, and reciprocity. That is, Ra is the force that allows the unseen and material realms to overcome the disunity that occurs during that which is becoming into existence and function in accordance with the inherent qualities of new unification. Ra then is the force that symbolizes the oneness of the unseen and the later material realm. Uncle Just and then. In comparing Ra'atum as Kepra with Ra, in comparing Ra'atum as Kepra with Ra'atum as Tem, we come to an understanding of the timelines of Tem, the third stage within the process of creation out of Nu. Asman writes that change was Kepra and completeness was Tem. Both concepts, writes Asman, were embodied in the gods Kepri, the becoming one, and Atum, the completed one, who were combined into a dual god at an early date and who stood in the theology of the course of the sun for the morning sun, Kepri, and the evening sun, Atum. I think I'll just read 1, 2, 3. Yes, this chapter is quite long. Let's read like 4 more pages. Okay. We can read here then that for the Anu, Tem reflects the fullness of the name Ra'atum, as Tem represents the completion of creation on the one hand. Ashby explains this point further when he writes that the etymology of Tem is to be complete, fullness, or to make an end of. In other words, the life force of existence, as it manifests in the state of completeness, characterizes the Tem stage of Ra-Atum. We can also infer here that as Ma'at set the template for reciprocity in existence, the Tem stage as completeness actually indicates a type of decline or dismembering. This expression is not written within the Anu cosmology directly. We can, however, examine the Pert Emheru again, for Tem's qualities are as written as a Hekau, though authors use the term Temu here, it nonetheless reads that homage to thee, Ra, at thy rising, Temu at thy setting, beautiful. What this Hekau suggests is that within the Tem stage of creation, the structure brought into existence during the Kepra and Ra-Atum stages have the potential to become hidden. Neither the Anu nor any subsequent Nile Valley Kemetiu or Kemetians suggest that reciprocity and oneness are no longer in existence. Within this Tem stage, however, the forces of Nu that brought forth seeming disunity or dismembering and remembering as in existence manifests as at the Tem stage as foundation for this process comprising the unseen and material realms. Budge writes that Tem represented the evening or night sun, and as such he is called the lightener of the Tuat with his two eyes. Tem is therefore the force of disunity or dismembering and remembering comprising existence. As Ra-Atum moves movement towards night, where the light of Ra-Atum does not illuminate the material realm, its illuminating properties became hidden on its way to the Duat, the transitionary space where remembering occurs with the state of Nu or oneness. Duat exemplifies the existence relationship between Ra-Atum and Nu. The Anu cosmology above does not mention the Duat directly. The Anu cosmology does mention that I, nature, created them, Neteru, out of Nu, the primeval water. We can therefore turn to Egyptological and chematological translations of pyramid texts, coffin texts, and the Amduat, what is in the netherworld, for our brief yet concise description of the Duat. According to these texts, this last cycle of Ra-Atum is returning to the source, Nu, from which Ra-Atum emerges. Honang writes that the nocturnal journey leads through an inner region of the cosmos that was regarded not only as the netherworld and the depths of the earth, but also as water, the primeval water called Nun, as darkness, and as the interior of the sky. Cycling through the stages of Kepra, Ra, Tem, and now the Duat, Ra-Atum, in the stage of the Duat, is closer to the onset of creation out of Nu. In accordance with Ra-Atum setting the template for which all in existence must cycle accordingly, the Duat is the necessary moment occurring subsequent to Tem, dismembering and prior to the Kepra, creating the unseen and material realms. The Duat then is the moment characterizing the qualities of non-material existence after dismembering. That is to say, if Ma'at is the foundation from which nature creates the unseen and material realms, then all that nature creates adheres to the order of reciprocity and balance. Therefore, all within existence manifests as the material realm out of the unseen realm, has to experience the extreme of the illumination of Ra-Atum within the Ra stage, where Ma'at takes precedence. For that which emerges out of nature is luminously expressive of Ma'at during the Ra stage. Qualities of the Duat, therefore, are reconfiguring, transforming, or remembering qualities emerging in response to the disfiguring and dismembering occurring in the 10th stage. All that becomes the unseen and material realms must remember. Duatic remembering qualities signify for the Anu that the Duat is also the Ra'atum moment in which nature creates the unseen realm out of Nu. Nature, Ra'atum, Ma'at, and the three preceding moments of activity are all that are in existence prior to the Duat. As the deepest level of the Duat is Nu, nature creates the remaining unseen forces comprising existence. Out of the deepest level of Nu, and in accordance with that which has been in existence prior to that moment, Hekau from the pyramid texts cites presence of the unseen forces or gods or Necheru within the Duat. Exit Hekau 252 reads, "You Necheru who are in the netherworld." Elaborating upon this point about that which comprises the Duat and the relationship between the unseen and material realms, Horning writes that the Duat contains everything that ever existed. We can suggest then that for the Anu, nature is needing a location in which the unseen realm Necheru, could exist. Nature creates the unseen realm in the Duat, the transitional space prior to that which becomes the material world during the Kepler stage. Ashby, in his Anunian theology, succinctly summarizes our point. The Duat, he writes, is the spirit realm. And we have a new cosmological cycle of time. Okay, I'll stop here for this reading and we'll continue tomorrow. We still are not done. That was page 69, and this chapter goes on to page 82. So I'll stop here and I'll continue from page 70 to 82 tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. My mission reading this dissertation is to bring the Rastafari people out of the Judeo-Christian, bigoted, patriarchal narrative of the Bible and more into the flowings of our African spirit. So tune in next time tomorrow for the remainder of chapter 3 in this dissertation of Rastafari, Haile Selassie within Rastafari thought, approaching the authenticity of Haile Selassie through our kinetic overstanding. Ankuja Seneb, Duawu Senetu and Senu. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Duawu Necheru, Duawu Emyaku.